Okay, so now that we have seen how to implement a very simple CI workflow, let's try to get it to do something useful. So if you see in this repository that you created at the very beginning, there's a bunch of different scripts and files. If you want, you can read through all the documentation for what it does. But for today, we'll just be looking at this scheme.cxx file. If you look at it, you'll see that it's a root file, and we'll have to compile it before we can use it. So the idea is to start by writing a job that compiles this file. In order to compile it, well, the way we can do it is by getting the compiler that is used by root, using this root config and then --cxx command, and then storing that in this compiler variable, then running that compiler with some flags to output the scheme binary using that cxx file. So if you want to try it by yourself, you should pause the video and add a job that performs these commands, and then come back here if you're having any trouble. So let's go ahead and do this. So let's open this main file. So far we only have the greeting job, but let's add a new job. Let's call it build scheme. So as usual, we need to tell it where you should run on, and let's use Ubuntu latest as before. As for steps, we'll want to run these two commands. So since we have multiple commands, we need a multi-line string so we can read it more easily. So we can use run and then this vertical bar and then input our commands. Let's just copy and paste this here. Let's fix this indentation. Okay, so now this command will run and then this one will run. So now we can exit and save. And let's as before, just add this file. Let's add a new commit. And let's push the changes. So here I'm still working on the branch that we made before, so it should update our pull request. So you'll see here that we have a new commit over here. And if you look at the actions tab, okay, there was something wrong. Let's see. Okay, so it seems like I made a typo. It should be steps. So let me add and commit this again. Okay, and now let's go back here. So now it's running. Now we can see that we have two jobs running. We have the greeting job and the build scheme job. Let's look at the details of the build scheme job. Okay, so here you'll see that it says that it couldn't find the root config command. So this is because the GitHub, the runners that GitHub provides us, they come pre-installed with a bunch of different software, but It is not the case for root. Root it doesn't come pre-installed. So we'll have to manually install it ourselves or do something about it. If we look at the root documentation, you'll see that there's a bunch of different ways to get it. There's one particularly easy one to do, and that is by using Docker images. We can you don't need to know anything else about containerization for this training. You just need to think about it as sort of like a base software for your system. So in our case, it's gonna be sort of like a base Linux system that comes pre-installed with root, and all we'll need to use to use one of these containers is add an extra key here in our job. We specify a container, and we'll use one of the Docker images that are stored here in the root Docker hub. You can click here and then go to tags and look at all the different options. So for right now, let's try using this particular one, root 6.26.10. Let's see. So if we copy this, we'll open our YAML file again, and then let's add this extra container key. Let's save it, and as before, let's add the file. Let's make a commit. Call it build scheme. And let's push to see what happens. Okay, so we can come back here. See that now there's something else running for a new commit. Let's click on the details of the build scheme job and see. So now what it's doing is that it's downloading this Docker image from Docker Hub, and it will run inside that image, which has root pre-installed, so the root config script will be able to run. Let's see, so it should only take a few seconds. Yeah, so this can vary a lot depending on how big the Docker image is. Okay, so it downloaded, but here we see that we actually got some other error. So now it says that scheme.cxx was not found. But how can this be when clearly in our repository we have this scheme.cxx file? Well, it turns out that it's because we need to explicitly tell GitHub to check out our repository, because by default the runners are going to be just a clean slate. They're not going to have any of our files. So we'll need to add an additional step that will actually check out our repository so we can access our files. So let's open again our YAML file, and then before this run step, let's add a new step. Let's call it checkout repo, and instead of using run, we can use predefined GitHub actions. So instead of run like here, you will use this uses key. We do uses, and then actions checkout, and then we specify a version or in general some reference for that action. Generally you'll see things like at v4 or at v some number. We'll talk a bit more about this different actions later. But now let's see if this works. So let's save. Let's add the file. Let's make a new commit. And let's push to GitHub. And since if we go to our pull request, we'll see that again something is running. So it will again take a little bit of time to download all the image and all the necessary files. This varies a lot depending on which Docker image you're using. There are some images that are very light and only take a couple of seconds to download. There are some that are very big and take longer. And while we wait, maybe I'll mention that as an alternative to using Docker images, we can use other of these predefined GitHub actions that I was just mentioning. So there's a bunch of different actions to set up a bunch of different software that we might need. For example, for Python, we can use actions/setup Python. Or if, for example, we want Conda or Mamba, which is an alternative, we can use Mamba -org and then set up Mamba. And these are simply GitHub repositories. If we go, for example, here we just type github.com and then / then the name of the action, that will take us to the repository that contains the action. It tells us how to use it in our workflows. For this particular one, the Mamba one, it's also useful because it lets us get root without having to use a Docker image. It seems like this is done, so let's go back here and see what happened. So now you'll see that we have this checkout repo step that we added, and let's see. Okay, so there was the checkout repo step, and then there was the step where it was trying to compile. So you'll see that now it did find the file, but now we got a different error where it couldn't find some of the headers. And this is because we forgot to add some additional flags to the compilation. So the way we can fix this is by defining these flags like this. So with root config, again, we can get the flags that it uses by default and the libraries that it uses by default. So if we define flag variables, let's see, let's open our file again. And apart from the compiler file, let's also define this flags file, and then we can simply use the value of this flags file over here. You can save, and as before, we can add the file, make a commit, and then we can push. So if we go back over here to our pull request, there's again something running. Which this time it should work. And as I was mentioning, this different way of setting up root is convenient because we don't have to go through, we don't have to set up some other Docker image. We can do it within the sort of like the software that GitHub provides us. So this would be sort of an alternative way of doing the same thing. We can install root with conda like this, and then we do the other steps as usual. We can try this out quickly over here. All this other thing finishes. Okay, it seems like it's going now. Okay, so that just finished, and you can see that now it worked properly and everything compiled and there were no issues. So here, just to show you briefly this alternative, if we open the main file again and we make a new build, let's just copy this build scheme. Let's fix the indentation, that's not right. Okay, let's see. So like this. So now you'll see that here, instead of having a container where we explicitly use something that has root pre-installed, here we manually install it with Mamba. Here we pass the root parameter. We additionally need this part over here to make sure that the environment gets set correctly, so that Mamba can actually be started. And actually, apart from this, we still need to check out the repo. I copy it from here. Let's see, so let's call it build scheme with conda, or build scheme conda. And this is before. Let's add the file. Let's add a new commit. And let's push to GitHub. If we refresh here, we'll see that now we have 3 jobs, and well, you should see that, well, ideally both should work if I did it correctly. While we wait, let's talk about what happens if we wanted to add multiple versions. So let's say you want to also test on the latest root version. Right now so far we're using version 6.26.10, but what if we also want to test the code with the latest root version? So if you want, I can pause the video and implement it yourself, and and then you can come back and watch the rest. So the way we can do this is simply by adding a new job. So before, so hopefully this should be done soon. For now, I'm just gonna pretend that it just worked, and I'm just gonna delete this whole thing. Let's see. So if we wanted to test the latest version of root, what we could do is simply copy and paste the code and call one of our jobs like build scheme latest. And then here, instead of having this old version of root, we can have the latest one here. Oh yeah, so you'll see that over here it also worked when we installed root with conda. Let's now push this new version of the file that has the testing on two versions of root. So let's add the file, let's create a commit, and let's push. And then if we go back to our pull request, we'll see that now we have 3 jobs. This is the one we had before, but now we also have the one with the latest version, where we simply changed this part to be just latest. And while we wait, I'll talk about these tags that you see over here. So this in general can be any reference. They can be, for example, a branch name or a commit hash, but usually you'll see just tags like this, like before. And sometimes it can be, if you're using many of these actions, it can be cumbersome to try to keep everything updated. So one convenient thing that GitHub allows us to do is to write a dependable.yaml file, so that it can keep track of all updates, and it will submit pull requests when there's a new update available. What we have to do to implement this is create a dependable.yaml file in the .github folder. So if we do max and then .github and then depend.bot.yml, we can simply so you'll see that it was already in there, and this will make sure that all the actions that we use in our workflows will be always up to date. Okay, so if we go back to over here, you'll see that now we have all the 3 jobs, and they all ran through. They were all successful. So that is it for this lesson. I will see you in the next one.